Hello crafty friends, it's Jess from jesscrafts.com, and today I have a card that features the Gerda Steiner Designs rubber stamps. I have this penguin stamp set with the two penguins sledding. The penguin stamp is sold individually, and while you might have thought that her release was just Christmas stamps, many of the stamps can be used even after the holidays to create some fun winter cards, and that's what I'm doing today. I stamped the penguins and started experimenting with my new Koi watercolors that I had gotten for Christmas. And after I colored them in, I decided to add some hills behind them with my Pit Artist pen, which is waterproof. And so when I do the watercoloring, it won't smear. And I'm using archival jet black ink for the stamping because, again, it is waterproof and works well with watercolors. I also decided to die cut the watercolor panel with the Lawn Fawn stitched rectangle dies. After I have colored in the image, I want to work on a sky. I've created this scene with the little trees from the Smells Like Christmas stamp set from Gerda Steiner, and I'm going to use the snow from that stamp set as well. I really love all the little builder elements of that stamp set, and I'll be using that again to create a background pattern paper to go behind this layer. I'm going to stamp the snowflakes in Versamark ink. It is a clear ink, and so you can't see where you have stamped until you add the embossing powder. But I'm okay with a little bit of overlap because I'm trying to create the random effect of snow falling, and so it doesn't need to look perfect. So what I'm doing is stamping a stripe of snow across, melting it with my heat gun, and then going in and stamping another layer. I want to have a little bit of overlap, but not too much. The snow will also not be able to go completely to the horizon line in between the trees because of the nature of the rubber stamp and the fact that it's a block of snow as opposed to individual snowflakes. But in the end, I think it still looks really great. And so I'm going to do another stripe there and continue on with the same technique until I have the entire sky filled. This will create an emboss resist. When I melt the embossing powder, it will no longer pick up any of the watercolor. The watercolor will resist against it, and so I can create a sky with the Koi watercolors. When I watercolor the sky, I'm going to start with the darkest blue from the Koi watercolor set. I also have Koi water brushes. The Koi watercolor sketch box that I am using comes with a medium brush, but I was able to get a small brush and a large water brush from Koi at Christmas as well. And so right now I'm using the small one so I get the fine detail in between the trees. With some water brushes I've had in the past, I found that I didn't like the way that the water flowed out. However, with the Koi water brushes, I'm much happier, and I think that the water flows more nicely and gives me enough control. And so I actually am using water inside the pen, which I haven't done in the past with different water brushes. Now, this fine detail brush is not great for filling the sky because it takes a long time, and so actually I'm just going to skip ahead in a few minutes or in a few seconds so that this video doesn't take so long, but I could also use my large water brush. I'm going to continue adding blues until I like the way the sky looks. I use 3 different color blues, as there's 3 different blues from the sketch box that I have. And I want to create an ombre effect in the sky with the darkest towards the bottom, and so you see I'm going back in with the very darkest blue there to make sure that there's a high contrast. I also want to watercolor in the trees, and I'm using 2 different colors of watercolor just to add a touch of shading and then filling in the little brown tree stumps as well. I love that watercolor, you can layer on color really easily, but you can even take color away. With Copics, you can always lay on more color, but you can't really take it away. With watercolors, if you add enough water, you can even start to pull back a little bit on the color that you're using. For the snow, I didn't want to leave it completely stark white, and so I watered down the black a lot just so that there was a little bit of a shadow of very, very light gray. The sketch box even comes with a white, so I decided to mix the black with the white to get the effect that I wanted, just so that it's not completely bright white, as I find that usually is too stark and actually doesn't really look realistic because even snow catches the light and it has some shadows. When I'm finished and I like the way it looks, I'm going to heat it with my heat gun to set all of the color. Now if you add water, it will still continue to lighten, but I find that heating it gives me a true idea of whether or not the colors are the way that I like it, because watercolors do dry back a little bit, so they're darker when they're wet. After I finish the watercoloring, I decide to spritz it with some Perfect Pearls from Ranger. In retrospect, I would have covered up the penguins because I don't actually like the way that the Perfect Pearls looks over them. However, I do love the way that it gives an overall shine to the card, and while it was difficult to photograph, in real life it looks fantastic. You see here that I'm specifically dabbing over the penguins' faces to try to pull a little bit of that glitter off, because once I sprayed it I realized that it wasn't quite the look that I had hoped for. I shake up the Perfect Pearls until all of the powder in the bottom is mixed up, and then I hold it about 6 inches to 12 inches above the project so that I get a nice light spray. If you hold it too close, you'll get a big pool of pearl, and that's not what I wanted for this card. You can just take some simple water to wipe it up. Now, like I said, I wanted to get rid of a little bit of the glitter here on the penguins' faces, and so I'm just spritzing on some water to see if I can pull off some of the Perfect Pearls. Perfect Pearls is water-based, and so it should come off a little bit with the water, and it does, but to continue to build some white back into the penguin's face, I'm actually taking the white watercolor and layering it over their faces as well. In the end, the penguins still do have some sparkle to their faces. And like I said, if I was doing the card over again, I would mask off the penguins so that I didn't get that effect, but it still looks great and I'm still happy. So now I want to create a background paper for the penguins. I could simply layer them onto this light purple paper and it would look great, but I like adding little touches and little details to cards because people often notice them, and it gives it just that extra interest and really shows them how much that you put into card making. Plus, I wanted to start using some of my Hero Arts shadow inks, which I also got from Christmas. So this is definitely a card where I was just exploring a lot of the fun new stuff that I had received. I'm going to take this heart, also from the Smells Like Christmas set where I got the snow and the trees, and just randomly stamp the hearts along the purple paper. This is a little bit tricky to do with a rubber stamp because you can't see exactly where the stamp is going. But I do trim my rubber stamps really close so I have a general idea. Plus, it doesn't have to be perfect because you're only going to see a very small amount of it. So if you get an overlap here or there, I wouldn't stress too much about it. The thing you can do, and you see me do this a couple times, is I'll turn the stamp over just to confirm where the top of the heart is or the bottom of the heart is. But as you can see, only a very small amount peeks out. So it's not something that has to be super precise. Now, I have completed most of the elements of the card, and I wanted to add a sentiment. But the sky was just looking really big and plain, and I thought that it would be nice to go with a really large sentiment. And even though I'd spent a lot of time creating that sky, I knew that if I did a fine detailed die cut, you'd still see a lot of the sky and you'd be able to appreciate the time that went into it, but it would also create a large interesting element on the card instead of so much essentially blank space. So I'm taking this die cut from Mama Elephant, and it's really detailed, so I put some adhesive on the back of the paper before I cut it out. Then I poked out all the little individual pieces, and I'm going to layer it onto the card. It's a happy die, and I thought that I could say Happy Winter Wishes. But I was also thinking that if you knew somebody who had a winter birthday, a simple happy birthday sentiment would be perfect too. While the penguins aren't super birthday, there's no like party hats on them or anything that screams birthday. If you knew someone who loved penguins and was having a winter birthday, it would be perfect. And you could go with a lot of other sentiments too. If you had like a thanks word die, that would work great. I have this Winter Fox stamp set from Lawn Fawn that has the warm winter wishes sentiment. But it's a stacked sentiment, and that's not what I want, because I want to make sure the sentiment, the winter wishes, stretches across the happy below it. And so I'm going to mask off parts of the sentiment and just stamp one line at a time so I can stamp them next to each other as opposed to on top of each other. So I used some Post-it note scraps to cover up warm and wishes, and then inked up winter. After I stamped that down, I was sure to clean the stamp really well, because when I stamp for a second time, the winter will actually be uncovered, so if there's any ink left on it, it will get onto the sentiment panel and create a smudged effect. So be sure to clean your stamp well in between. After you put on the ink with the mask covering the sentiment, that part of the sentiment you don't want, you can pull it off and then stamp it. I did get a little bit of uneven stamping, which was kind of to be expected because when you're covering parts of it, it's a little bit tricky to get full coverage of ink, but if you have a thin black pen, you can usually fix anything like that. And so when I have any concerns about the sentiment not being perfect, I try to use black ink because I know I'll always have a black pen to fix any mistakes. I'm going to create a banner out of that sentiment strip. It was a little bit tricky because I couldn't quite tell how thin the sentiment was going to be, and so you see here that I kind of just fuss with it till I get it the way I like because I want to make sure enough of the word dye is showing through. After I have that adhered, I'm going to pop up the watercolor panel on some foam tape because it's a little bit warped. After taking all the water and all the heating, it's bound to get warped even though it's really quality 140-pound watercolor paper, and so adding it with foam tape just helps to fix that. And that's it for my card today. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more videos like this, you can subscribe to my channel. I will list the products in the video description below, including a link to Gerda Steiner Designs where you can find these amazing rubber stamps that are perfect for all winter long. Thanks for watching.